Our program today, Missouri's Wild Horses, is being presented by Jefferson College Applied Communications Assistant Professor Holly Ross. As an avid photographer, Holly learned of the wild horses found in Shannon County in January of 2016 during a wildlife photography workshop. That fall, she attended her first wild horse photo workshop and at the time felt she found a piece of herself that she didn't know was missing. Since that first visit, she has become a passionate educator when it comes to the horses and is an administrator for the Missouri Wild Horses Facebook page. In addition, her photography has been used as a fundraiser for bringing a metal sculpture of a horse to Eminence, as well as for a sign that is posted with the horse, briefly explaining the history of the wild horses. Holly's photography has been presented in multiple galleries in the greater St. Louis area. Holly is also a juried member of Best of Missouri Hands, serves as an education consultant for and is a founding member of the St. Louis Art Chamber of Commerce, and is an instructor with the Academy of Natural and Wildlife Arts, where she facilitates and co-leads workshops on photographing the wild horses of Shannon County, Missouri. And somehow you find time to be a grandma, too. New grandma, first grandchild in May, last May. Today, Holly will provide a brief look at the history of the wild horses and share some of her amazing photography. Please join us in welcoming Ms. Holly Ross.
Thank you. This is new for me. I don't normally talk in front of this many people. Usually I have a very small captive audience. So if I fumble, please excuse that. I was shocked to have this many people here today. So thank you for coming out and spending your day with us. The Wild Horses of Missouri, as Dana said, I was introduced to them in 2016. I was at a workshop to photograph trumpeter swans. And the person leading the workshop was going through all of the things that she's photographed in the wild and captive animals as well, like a mountain lion. And she was flashing through pictures, and all of a sudden this horse picture came up. And it was surrounded by this arbor almost of trees and vines, and there was fog, and it was lit from the back, so it was kind of glowing, and I went, I have to have that. So that's when my journey began. So if you know anything about Eminence, Missouri, it was primarily settled with settlers from Kentucky and Tennessee who came for the mining and the logging industries. I know that Dina said somebody asked about where Shannon County is. It is the red county on the map. It's about 2.5 hours from here, sometimes 3, depending on the way that you drive down. But it's a beautiful drive, and I highly recommend 21 to 106 and not Highway 19 if you choose to drive that, unless you like NASCAR. I don't. So through the years, this area became really popular with the wealthy from the St. Louis area, and they would go down there and recreate. So it's been a touristy type area for a long time. Most of us know Shannon County for the mills that are down there, for the bluffs, for canoeing and kayaking the rivers. There's a lot of neat scenery down there as well. And this is why I go back. There are actually more horses there than there's the bluff. More horses than listed on that description of today's program. Actually, there are about 50 horses in that area and 4 bands of horse herds. Feel better here. Now, we don't know how these horses came about. It is disputed, even among people who have lived in Shannon County all of their life. We do know that some of the Indian tribes that were there had horses. And we do know that those horses would have come up through Spain. We know that because there's a little bit of oral history behind that. However, there's no DNA proof that that's the case. We do know that during the Great Depression, farmers turned horses out instead of eating them. that they turned out all of their livestock because it was just too expensive to take care of them. So we do know those facts. We can see that there's Appaloosa in the mix. We do know from anecdotal history that there were a couple of quarter horses that had been turned out. There were a couple of bay horses that had been turned out. So we know some of the history. The project that's going on right now is to see whether or not we can prove that these horses were here before white settlers arrived in Missouri, because if we can, then they become a native species, which is a good thing because that means they're protected. Right now they're considered feral because they were once domesticated. So if we can get that DNA proof, then they'll be completely, totally protected. So in the early 1990s, the National Park Service had come in to the Ozark Scenic National Riverway in that area. And the National Park Service, I don't know if any of you guys know, the National Park Service doesn't like horses. They don't like wild horses. They were actually going to slaughter all the horses. That was their plan. And a group of citizens from the area, and people who had been trail riding there for decades, got together and they said, no, we can't allow this to happen. This has to change. They actually rode horses and marched to the Park Service headquarters in Van Buren. And when the senators from the area got wind of what was going on, they contacted the people in the area, and they're like, okay, let's do something about this. Obviously, people are passionate about it. So they got together and passed a bill. The bill went forward. The bill was rejected. So they thought, well, we'll go ahead and try again. And Kit Bond was actually one of the senators that was involved in helping get the horses here. So when we look at this history, we have to thank those people that came before us, and sadly, some of those people are advanced in age. One of the founders is, I think I was told he was 87, and he is not getting around very well. And so now we're looking at, these people who were founders who struggled and fought so hard, not being able to continue that fight, and it's up to my generation and the one after mine to kind of help protect them and educate people. So technically, there are no wild horses in the United States at all. Not even the ones out west, not the ones off North Carolina. They're technically all feral. But the horses around Shannon County, the residents actually consider them wild because they are roaming the hills without much human interference at all. Sure, there are people who decide, oh, that's a nice little horsey, I'm going to go feed the horsey apples and carrots because horses like apples and carrots. That's actually really, really bad for these horses. It's not part of their normal diet, and it can actually kill them because they are not used to this. They will actually eat bark off of trees. They will pull leaves off of trees. They survive all winter without human interference. In fact, they put hay bales out for these horses, and the horses spook because they're not used to that. They don't know what it is. So these horses really, truly are wild. The Missouri Wild Horse League, who is charged with their management, only steps in the event of an emergency. And when I say only in the event of an emergency, it's got to be serious. We had a mare with the horse herds a few years ago who we were documenting. She was bleeding from one eye, and she had a big lump, a big mass above her eye. And we would be like, yes, but it's getting worse. Yes, but look at the pictures, it's getting worse. And they actually waited and let nature take its course instead of pulling her from the field. And when she got so bad that she couldn't get up, then they went out and they took care of her. They wanted nature to take care of her instead of them stepping in, because that's what they believe should happen. Their wild, natural life is what they would like to have happen. So in 1993, Doug Kennedy, an attorney from Poplar Bluff, decided to step in and help save the horses. It actually went to the Supreme Court once. And Bill Emerson got involved. like I said, Kenneth Bond, John Ashcroft got involved, and finally, with the help of President Clinton, in 1996, he signed a law to protect our horses as part of Shannon County's and the Ozarks heritage. So this law says there can be no more than 50 horses total. If there are more than 50, the National Park Service can come in. If the horses become a nuisance, the National Park Service can come in. If somebody gets hurt, because we all know, we've heard stories about people going out and petting buffalo and then getting hurt. Sometimes we don't do smart things. But if somebody were to get hurt, the Park Service would come in. So I'm a huge advocate of keeping them safe and protecting them from us, really. But then Missouri Wild Horse League, which came out of this, is charged with their management. So somebody asked me about the number of horses. There are about 50. There's probably more. One herd has split. There were 18 at last count. So yeah, there's more than 50. But Missouri Wild Horse League does passive roundups. And for those of you who are familiar with horses, and you think about the wild horse roundups out west where they're using like the helicopters and everything, we don't do that. They put pens out in the fields. They put hay and salt blocks and all that kind of good stuff to attract the horses. The horses wander in and out for a few days, and they go check on the pen. And if they get the ones that they want in the pen, which are usually the younger ones, and generally the stallions, because the young colts and young stallions are the troublemakers of the group, they pull them. They take them to cross-country trail rides, which is in Eminence, and that's the headquarters of the Missouri Wild Horse League. And from there, a vet comes out, checks them, gelds them if it's necessary, does a Coggins test to make sure that they're, healthy and everything like that. Then they get adopted. It's only $175 to adopt a wild horse. You cannot buy one that cheaply. And they are wild. They are wild. So this one, I was talking to someone earlier about the horses at Echo Bluff, and they were showing me their pictures that they had. This is a horse that had been with that group, and he and the two mares that were hanging out at Echo Bluff State Park, they were getting into campers. They were getting up against campers at night because campers were warm. But what he figured out how to do is actually go in and out of the lodge. He figured out how to operate the handicap access button outside the lodge and would just go in and wander around. If you've never been there, it's worth going to and wandering around. It's a very pretty lodge. So of course he had to be rounded up because he was very human habituated to the point where he wanted to be inside somebody's house. If they become human habituated, they have to be pulled. They just have to be. It's for their safety as well as ours. This stallion, I loved him, he was gorgeous. You can see kind of the Appaloosa markings on him with the spotty dappled coat. So that's kind of how we know that Appaloosas are part of their heritage. But this stallion was actually adopted a few years ago. And it was so sad when he was adopted because he was just gorgeous. So, photographing the herds. This was my first day. It was foggy. On Friday night when we go down and have a workshop, we get this, the safety talks. There are bears down there. I've not seen one. But, there are bears, beware of that. And watch for the horses because they could come next to you, run up next to you or whatever. So I'm like, okay. So the next morning is really foggy. And the lady leading the workshop, the one in the code there, she was so excited. And I was like, well, this is going to be horrible because it's foggy. I can't see them. Wow, was I wrong. So we got out, we set up our tripods, and there were about 7 of us, and we're all in a nice little row. And we knew they were there. We could see white dots across the field. And this is a big field. And as we all get set up and we're waiting, because it's foggy and you can't take pictures in the fog, we hear them start running toward us. Some of you are smiling at that. It was scary. Because they were in the fog and we couldn't see them. And we could hear that it was coming toward us. But they emerged right in front of us, one by one, all in a row, lined up just like we were. And it was the most glorious moment. I've never had it happen again. But even like, I've got goosebumps. Every time I talk about it and remember it, I get goosebumps because it was so magical just to have them emerge from this fog and just stand there and look at us. And it was at the point where none of us took pictures for a few minutes because we were just in awe. And every time I go there, I think it's a blessing because I get to spend time with beautiful creatures. And it just, like Dina was saying in the introduction, when I go there, I feel like part of me is restored. And there's just something about being there with them in a field. I don't care if they've got their heads down and grazing, it still makes me feel better about everything. And all of the noise of the world disappears when you're with them. Part of that's because you don't have cell service down there. I don't go, Michael, I don't go when I have papers to write. Sometimes. So, this is a picture one of my friends took of me down on the ground interacting with the horses. What we advise people to do is stay at least a school bus length away from the horses. So that is the advice that we share with people. Some of them will come up closer. Some of them will invade your space, which is a bad thing. And there have been many times where I've said, nope, nope, we can't do that, we can't do that. And I've had to even push them physically to get them to go away because they have become very human habituated. But typically, we're more off at a distance. And my photographs are all taken with a telephoto lens. And then if I want a really tight headshot, like the one here, I'll crop it down and make it look like I was really close. But I wasn't. So finding the herds and interacting with them. You can see the range. The herd out here, by 106, that's the Rocky Creek herd. That herd goes anywhere from Owl's Bend, which is part of that area, all the way down to Peck Ranch. It's the huge, huge territory that they cover. Peck Ranch is like down in this area. So they cover a very, very wide range. They're the hardest ones to find. They're also the most skittish. They're also the ones that have 18. Because we can't get to them to rank them up. The next herd that's in is where Shawnee herd resides, typically. If you know anything about the area, there are signs up down there that point you in different directions, but it's named after the Shawnee Creek, which is what they follow. And they'll follow that creek and the river over to Two Rivers Campground, and they're seen anywhere in that range. Sometimes they'll go over a mountain and interact with another herd, but that's generally for just breeding purposes. I've only ever seen it once. I've heard of it happening another time. But let me tell you, when 20 horses from 2 different herds get together in one field and then they take off in different directions at the same time, it's kind of cool to see. The herd right above that, that's where the Broadfoot herd is. That used to be the Broadfoot farm, which is why it's now the Broadfoot field and the Broadfoot herd. They like to stay in one particular field, but lately they've been crossing the river a lot more because they aren't really fond of us. So when they feel too much pressure, or if there's a new baby, they cross the field and hide from us. And by too much pressure, I mean there can be a literal parade of cars driving down some of these back country roads to go see these horses. It gets pretty excessive sometimes. But I'm guilty of it too. Up by Round Spring, you'll see 2 hearts. That's where the Echo Bluff Round Springs herd kind of hangs out. And if you've seen them, if you've been to Echo Bluff and you've seen the horses there, they're going to be found in either of those 2 areas. They've got a smaller range. There are some independent bands, some stallion groups that hang out in different little pockets around the county, but these are the ones that we've seen time and time again. They're the ones that have the names that are most dependable. If you ever do want to go down and you have mobility issues, the Shawnee herd is actually the easiest to see. You can, if they're off of Highway V, just pull in to the field and watch them from your car. If you can walk on flat surfaces that are a little uneven and irregular, there's a field there at Shawnee Creek where it's a nice flat field, probably 2 football fields in length, that you can walk out there. And then the Broadfoot herd, you can see from your car. You can actually drive all the way around it if you want to. I don't. There's sand back there, and I don't trust my car. And then Echo Bluff, you can generally see from your car. So you don't have to put on hiking gear to go see these horses. Most of them you can access from your car. Just one of the back roads. If I were you and you want to be really adventurous and find the horses and set off on some back roads, don't go to Klebsig Mill. People tell you in the area, go to Klebsig Mill. Oh, Klebsig Mill's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful shut-ins area. It's gorgeous. If you have a truck. I have a Subaru. Last time I was down that road, I thought it was a little sketchy. But any other herd, you're okay. In fact, I tell people the roads down there are better than the roads in my subdivision. It's true. So I was asked earlier too about the foals, because I've got a picture back there that's a generational picture. The foals are usually born black or brown. We don't have any horses that are truly white horses. Truly white horses are like albino. They have pink skin. These horses all have dark skin. But they do change color, like we do. I got so lucky with this picture. I was photographing some horses off to my right, and I knew he had walked off, and I was like, I wonder where he went, and I turned around and I saw that. That was worth the price of admission. That's a Shawnee field. Okay, so I talked about the roundups a little bit, and this is actually one of the horses in the holding pen. If you want to round up one of the horses, or round up the horses, if you want to adopt one of the horses that have been rounded up, you call and get your name put on the list. So last March, this baby that I've been photographing, she's about 2.5 in this picture, she was in the pen. So it was a Sunday, and I called, left a message, and I said, hey, my name's Holly Ross. I want the horse. I want the one that you got. She was captured in Broadfoot, and I want her. I hadn't talked to my husband about that yet. Boy, was he surprised, because in May he got a phone call while I was at work. And we actually, my name was drawn for the first one to select one of the 5 horses that they had to adopt. So she spent from March till mid-May in that holding pen, which breaks my heart because she was away from her family. She did have other horses in there with her, but still, she was away from her family. But now she's mine. So she was born in July of, I think, 2019, if I do my math correctly. And she just turned 3 this year. She's a handful, but she's very sweet. Since we've had her, she has gained probably 150 pounds, which was needed. It really was. She lost a lot of weight in that holding pen because she was stressed. We haven't really started doing much training with her. She's comfortable-ish, kinda, with a halter. She doesn't like really to be led. She'd rather follow you around like a puppy dog, and that's fine. But we're working on just getting her comfortable with me and with the people that have the farm where she's at, and just getting used to us being in her space, because she hadn't been like that before. Now, I will say, she was a very loving horse. Remember I said I had to tell someone no, 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 and push them on the nose? That was her. Anytime I knelt down in the field, she's like, hey, what you doing? And she's still that way. I can't be friends with the sheep that live on the farm or the other horses that live on the farm because I'm hers. But that's okay. I'm glad we have a happy ending story for her. I'm glad that I can be part of her future. And I can only do that because of what the Missouri Wild Horse League did in the past and still do today. And I'm just thankful that these creatures were brought into my life, and I know he doesn't understand why I have this connection with a horse. Well, you know, I gotta pick on him, he came. And he'd do the same to me. But if you have questions about the horses, I'm happy to answer questions. I know that I talked to a few people before. I've got some pictures in the back that you're welcome to go back and look at. I know the library's done a great job of pulling some resources. I kept it under half an hour, I'm pretty sure. Probably not even close. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Yes, if you have them in a pen and you have Emmy, can you do a DNA sample because you have the horse?
Yes, there is a university that if I pull 30 to 50 hairs from either her tail or her mane, I can actually submit them for DNA testing.
Yes.
You see the Mustangs in the West, and they're so ugly. And these horses are beautiful, and I'm just wondering, is that because they were turned loose instead of just growing up naturally? I don't understand.
I don't know why they stay so pretty. It's probably due to crossing the rivers more frequently, because they do cross the rivers. And now, I've got pictures of them being pretty. I have seen them pretty muddy and ugly too.
I'm just talking about their heads, the conformation of their bodies.
Yeah.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. It probably does have something to do with more recent additions of DNA rather than more ancient additions of DNA.
What about age? What's the oldest one that you think could be down there?
One of my friends is an International Photojournalist Hall of Fame member. He's been photographing them for 12 years, and he's guessing that 20 to 25 is the age of the oldest mare. She's not getting around really well now, and a stallion kind of stays by her and protects her. In fact, the first two that I had in the slides were them. So she's on the left, and she looks like she might be blind in her right eye, and he stays right by her. But this is her back last spring.
How old does a horse live? About that?
Yeah, about that.
Because you said, I read on the last one, it said a baby, still a baby at 3 years old,
Yeah.
so I didn't know how that.
Some of them, like, I've been told somebody had a horse that lived to be like 32. I can't imagine that, but 20s is generally,
25 to 30.
yeah. Any other questions?
Here, we got one.
Unless you've already said, it sounded to me as though going when the babies are being hidden wouldn't be the best time. Is there a good or bad time to go?
Well, they can breed all year long, so there's no real good gauge on time of year to go. I know I was down there last week, 2 weekends ago, and one of the herds was scarce. Nobody had seen him for 2 weeks. Last week, my friends went down there, and they were there with 2 new babies. So So that's, if you don't see them, there's probably something up, and that's usually what's going on. As far as time of day to see them, as a photographer, I try to go early morning or late at night. Not late at night, but late afternoon, simply because that's when the light's better. It's really, really difficult to photograph a white horse in the middle of the day. Your camera doesn't like it. And they do turn white. Yes.
That's actually gray.
Yes.
And is Missouri Wild, are they predominantly gray horses?
They will age and turn to a white or a cremello or a gray color, yes.
Yeah, because that's like in the breed.
Yes.
Some horses are beige and chestnut, but the grays usually start out black or a
Yep.
little dark. By the time they're about 2 or 3, you can start to see it. That picture of your horse at 3
Yep.
is kind of classic. You can tell she's starting to gray
Yes.
right there a little bit.
Yep. She's got a couple of white spots.
Yeah, in a couple of years, it'll be what you've been calling white.
Yep.
That's actually gray.
Yeah, so they go through that aging process just like we all do. And, you know, get a little bit of white growing in 1 year, a little bit more than
But
that.
there's a lot of horses that never do turn gray like it.
Right.
You can tell they're older.
Yeah, the Rocky Creek herd, the one that's the most difficult to find, that actually has the most color to the herd. There was a bay that was introduced a few years ago, and the babies from that one are just gorgeous. They look like paints. I mean, they're just gorgeous, gorgeous horses.
When you say introduced, what do you mean?
Somebody dumped their horse.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
That's not a good thing. Horses who have been domesticated and living on a farm don't know how to survive in the wild on their own. They're used to people bringing them food. So yes, that stallion lasted a couple of years, but while he was there, he produced a few offspring, and the mare that's there now, she's beautiful. I mean, she's just beautiful.
So then, did he get pulled out then?
Nobody knows. He just disappeared. So when there are too many stallions, I don't know how many people know anything about horses, but when there are too many stallions in a herd, they often either break apart or they will fight. And I've got a picture of 2 young colts back there fighting, and they fought dirty. And the object is to injure one, or when they get older, to kill the competition. I mean, it's just what it is. And there have been stallions lost to that, yes.
I can't help but wonder if they're good about avoiding cars, because I know we have deer impacts all the time around here.
No. In the winter, the horses like salt. And in the winter, when the roads have been salted, the horses are often found on the roads. And what's really bad about that is with their height, the headlights of your car don't catch their eyes like they do with deer. So it's kind of like having a collision with a moose, because their eyes are so high, we can't see them until it's too late. There were actually 3 killed a couple of years ago. One of the stallions from the Rocky Creek herd who was, oh, if I could have brought him home. He's big and just beautiful horse. He was killed, the lead mare was killed, and when she was killed, they found out that she was pregnant. So 3 of them. And then the Round Springs herd up by Echo Bluff, from time to time, they'll be out on the highway. And in fact, when I was down there a couple of weeks ago, I had my orange vest and I was standing along the edge of Highway 19 going like this and slowing people down because the horses were 2 feet from the road. And they weren't responding to us trying to push them back. Yes?
I was wondering, usually, don't you have like one primary stallion that's kind of the lead person? I was wondering how many stallions can you have in a herd versus females?
Well, usually, what we've seen happen with these horses is it's usually the oldest mare, or there is a mare that's the lead mare,
Oh, really?
and the stallion listens to her.
I like this horse.
Does she do all the fighting?
She will fight. Yeah, if there's another mare that's trying to take her place, she'll fight. Yeah, I mean, the stallions will fight for mating rights and privileges,
Yeah.
and to be the lead stallion, they'll actually follow at the end of the herd, kind of as the protector, but a mare's taking the lead there.
I think they're trying to reverse that here in the United States, trying to.
I don't know.
My husband's not here, yes, no, I'm kidding.
Way back in the back.
Are there other predators?
Yes, we have mountain lions down there, which I've not seen. We have, well, they're not predators, but we have a lot of feral hogs down there. Coyote, of course, bear, but they're not gonna, take advantage of the horse unless it's already been killed. But yes, we do have mountain lion down there. I've seen a footprint.
Did you raise your
Do
hand?
they follow, like, the people riding horses on trail rides?
They don't necessarily follow them. They'll be curious. Like if you're out with like the Shawnee herd and they're out in the middle of their field and a trail ride comes by, they'll be like, hey, it's horses. And they might run over and just like, okay, you're cool. And then they'll go back to eating. So they don't necessarily follow, but they are aware that there are other horses. Yes.
We're showing an Appaloosa at the beginning. No, but are they not part of these wild herds or?
Well, they're all interbred, so we know that Appaloosa is there because it shows up in the coats. And as they're graying out, we can see those markings of an Appaloosa. But it's not just Appaloosa that are there.
Is there some danger that they might interbreed too much?
Probably, but I mean, we can't really stop that. That's why they try to pull the young stallions and the young colts when they can pull them from the herds, simply because that cuts down on chances of interbreeding. But that's gonna happen, they're wild animals.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you,
Thank you.
Holly.